Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Boring. As always, it's presented by the man at the bottom of the screen, Blake the Attorney Maislin. We got some Super Bowl to recap. We got a Bengal asking for a trade when he's probably going to get cut. We've got some Tee Higgins cryptic tweets. We got a lot of college basketball to get to, and then my favorite part of the podcast, the very end, where you can hit up the Xverse, hit up the hashtag Ask Skinny Anything, ask me a question on any topic. I will be happy to try to answer it to the best of my ability. It does not have to be sports related. Rick is soon to be on his way to the friendly confine. Nothing says Valentine's Day like a night in Green Bay, Rick.
A night in Green Bay with Jim Kelch. That is Valentine's Day at its finest.
Hopefully you guys can split a box of chocolates.
Yeah. Mo Egger did want me to rank the best Horizon League cities to spend Valentine's Day in case he ever wants to take his wife for a Horizon League basketball trip on Valentine's Day. I said, you might be looking into a second divorce at that point, my friend.
I was going to say, I know Fairborn would be at the bottom of your list.
That's exactly right. I'm glad. My wife said, would you even put that on the list? I said, absolutely not.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
All right, let's get into the Super Bowl. Blowout win for the Eagles. Skinny, I was a little bit surprised by how much Bengals fans especially enjoyed watching that blowout of a Super Bowl. I thought it was the worst Super Bowl ever all the way around during my lifetime. What was your take on it? Were you as bored as I was?
I don't know. That New England Rams Super Bowl was pretty bad. I think this one was exciting for a lot. My daughter hosted another family at her house. She made all the food or hors d'oeuvres, all that stuff. And they were really into it because I think there was I didn't realize it was just such an anti-Kansas City Chiefs.
I didn't realize that either. I mean, I knew people were tired of them and gotten over. And I know like there's the Taylor Swift stuff going on too and Travis Kelce, but I didn't realize how much people, especially in this area, really wanted them to lose that game. And even so much so that they'd willingly watch a blowout of a Super Bowl.
Yeah, now most everybody left at the end of the third quarter, but the first half, they were all into it just because of, I think, the shock and awe factor of Kansas City is really just getting its ass kicked at the moment.
I guess it's almost like, my dad, I'm not a golfer. My dad is a big golfer, and he used to like to watch golf, especially when they were playing a really difficult event, because he liked to see the pros go out and hack it like he would, duff one or two. Sure. It was almost like that feeling where people are like, see, that's what our quarterback looks like when Pat Mahomes was getting rushed and running around with his head cut off and playing terrible football. I think it was almost like fun for fans to be like, yeah, he looks human, just like our quarterback.
Yeah, and of course it starts with a bad penalty call. In fact, the guy that was Mike Pereira was the rules analyst for the day, and even he said it was a bad call. Very rarely do you ever hear those guys criticize calls. They may try to couch it, but they were openly critical. But it felt like, okay, here we go. That goofy Kansas City gets all the calls. Maybe it is true, and then it turned out not to be at all because it didn't matter.
Do you think Mike Pereira is getting far enough removed? Like he's out of the game long enough that he doesn't know all the refs on such a personal level to where he's being more willing to criticize them? Because it feels like I've heard him do that more within the last year or two than he's ever done throughout his career.
Or maybe the officiating is just getting worse.
That could be too.
Yeah, maybe both things can be true.
Yeah, for me, I just don't see the Chiefs as that big of a rival to the Bengals. I know that's the big narrative in Cincinnati. I know even the players will kind of talk up the rivalry between the two teams. For me, it's just like, I mean, worry about the AFC North first, man. Like you got to beat those teams and get past those teams a little more often before we start talking about the Chiefs and the Bengals having a real rivalry for the AFC. I would have much rather have seen them play a competitive game, I think. Now, I am curious about, we get into quarterback legacies and all of that stuff. You start talking about that with these games. I thought this was a big legacy game the way it turned out for not just Pat Mahomes, but Josh Allen. I thought Josh Allen's legacy is impacted more than anyone's. He has to be looked at as a choke artist after this year. How did you lose to that Chiefs team? The Bills were good.
Fair point. Yeah, and I know, there was all we dabbled in it a little bit last week. We didn't get into the whole GOAT discussion. We didn't go down that wormhole, but we brought it up a little bit. Now I'm hearing people that this is damaged. It hasn't damaged Mahomes. I mean, he's won a bunch and he's been to a bunch. It's hard to argue with that.
It does a little bit.
He wasn't good. He admittedly was. He owned it. He owned it, and good for him for owning it. There was no excuses. Even though, really, honestly, he had excuses for the fact that he took the snap and had guys in his lap all day. But no, he's still a great quarterback. He's always going to be remembered as a great quarterback, and he's still got years to paint that narrative even more.
No question about that. But let me give it a different perspective because I understand where you're coming from at that. But let me show you this. Like, if he wins that game and plays well, what's the narrative about him?
Oh yeah, that he's trending towards the GOAT
I
territory.
mean, probably passing up Tom Brady at this point. We can really have that conversation. He is truly as good as we've ever seen. Instead, he looks as bad as we've ever seen him play, looks completely human, and doesn't get that extra Super Bowl win. I mean, it completely changes how we feel about him, at least for the next 5 or so years.
Yeah, and we'll see what was this a one-off because Philadelphia's front four was that good, and it is that good. I mean, they've invested draft picks in it and done well drafting to it. They did well drafting into the secondary as well, obviously with Cooper DeJean and others. Is this a one-off for Kansas City, or was the whole year-long trend that they just kept getting by, and then lo and behold, they finally got smacked around, and then they start to take a precipitous drop off. I don't know. I wouldn't bank on that if I was anybody with Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, but it sure looked like the beginning of the end to some degree for them. Did it not?
It felt that way. We're watching that game. It felt that way. And that's why I think when you go back to the Pat Mahomes conversation, it kind of does feel like it was a meaningful game for his legacy because maybe this is the start of the downswing. I'm curious about, you brought up whether or not this was sort of like a one-off performance or whether or not this is a trend for the Eagles and the Chiefs. Do you think the Eagles provided a blueprint for how to handle Mahomes in the sense that they didn't blitz him at all the entire game? They just sent 4, they got to him with 4, and they played zone on the back end and said, you're going to have to throw into a lot of bodies.
Sure, it's a blueprint, but how many teams have 4 guys who can get after the quarterback like Philly did? I mean, let's not forget, the Lou Anarumo defense in the 2021 AFC Championship game was a lot of times rush 3, drop 8, right? I mean, they didn't blitz much in that game either, and that was a blueprint, except you better get home. And I don't know how many teams can get home with 4. I think you would ask any defensive coordinator in this league, would you prefer to blitz, or would you prefer if I gave you 4 guys who could get home to just rush 4, drop 7? And they would all tell you, I'd rather get home with 4 every single time because I got more guys in coverage and I'm not opening myself up to big plays. So is it a blueprint? Absolutely. But how many teams have dudes like Philly that can rush the passer like they do?
I'm so glad you brought up the Bengals' performances against them too when they've done pretty well, because that's what it made me think of, is some of those similar game plans. I was like, I don't think the Eagles came up with some new revolutionary idea for how to stop Pat Mahomes. The difference is they had the personnel to actually execute it, and very few teams in this league do on a consistent basis. I think other teams have definitely tried that strategy before.
And I'm sure Vic Fangio on his play sheet had multiple blitz packages that he would have deployed if he needed them. But when you don't need them, you don't need to go to them.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was impressive to watch the performance they put on defense, without a doubt, especially to make Mahomes and company look that pedestrian. It was an impressive performance. It didn't make it fun to watch for me, though.
I gotta give one shout out here, Rick. We talked food last week. The Super Bowl is also about foods and snacking.
Yeah.
My daughter made pretzel bites from scratch that were just ridiculously good. She got a beer cheese from Trader Joe's, maybe, I think.
Oh, now you're talking my language.
That was some eats. Now that and I forgot another one of my favorite snacks at Super Bowls. It didn't really come up. I don't even know if you like these. People who like these love these, like myself. People who don't, because they just don't look good, but they're really good. She made some really good hanky panks too.
Oh, I thought I brought that up last week. If not, yeah.
Yeah, if you did, then shame on me, because I love those.
Yeah, I'm a big hanky pank guy, or the other term that some people call them by. But yeah, those are very good.
And then she did one more. She did bacon wrapped little miniature wieners.
Oh, that sounds good. Have you had the bacon wrapped jalapenos with the cream cheese?
I have. I like that. She didn't have those, but I've had those. Yeah.
That's good too.
That's top notch.
We just stayed home, just me and the wife. So we did a sheet pan nachos to
nice.
share. Yeah, did get through much of it, but it was good. What did you think of the ads?
None of them really hit me a ton. My favorite was the Beckham and Matt Damon ad. I don't know why that hit me as funny, but I really liked that one. But none of them really hit me a ton. Like, that was overly clever. The seal one was creepy, man. I'd already seen that ahead of time, but some people around me had not seen it. I mean, that was just really creepy.
But I thought it was one of the better commercials. I mean, it definitely caught my attention, and I remembered it, and I know it's for Mountain Dew.
Yeah, right. I remember the product. I remember Mountain Dew. You're right about that. That's a big part of it. You got to remember the product.
You know, the other one that I thought was pretty good, I mean, it's a dumb commercial, but I felt like a lot of The one thing I was happy about is it felt like a lot more companies took risks this year.
Yeah,
There were
yeah.
people trying to be really funny or really off the wall or really different. A lot of them didn't land, but I think they were actually taking risks. It wasn't as minimalistic as it's been in the past. But the Reese's Big Lava Cup
Oh yeah.
one where they're
Yep.
all going towards a volcano with lava,
Yeah,
and
that was dumb in my opinion, but
it was.
I get the correlation. It was just so dumb. But then I kept looking at the Reese with the chocolate coming out of it. Then I'm like, I don't know if that would be good or not. I think it would be, but it just looks weird.
It didn't make me want the Reese's
Right,
necessarily, but I don't know
right.
that that was ever going to be for me. I just don't think I liked it. But I'll admit, I'll remember that product for. I mean, it was
Yeah,
definitely there's a tie-in with the product. It was a weird zany commercial. It wasn't great, but it got the job done. I thought.
yeah, I'll give you
But
that.
yeah, I mean, going back to my point about worst Super Bowl ever, it's like bad game, bad halftime performance, and the commercials were just there wasn't really any that jumped out to me. I do think after you have a kid, commercials hit you different because like the one with the kid fighting cancer, the
Yeah,
Pfizer commercial. I know
yeah.
Pfizer's like an evil corporation, everything, but that kid fighting cancer commercial hit me differently than it would have a year ago.
Oh, it had both of my daughters in tears. I mean, I don't know why it did, but it had them both in tears. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, let's
Oh, by
switch to
the,
the
and by the way, so I know of Kendrick Lamar. I know some of his music, right? I do. But man, I listen, most rap you're probably not supposed to understand. I think rap in the 2000s, you could at least understand the lyrics enough. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. I really couldn't.
look.
He goes so fast.
I am a Kendrick Lamar fan. I like his music.
So was
I
my
thought
son-in-law. He loved the whole halftime show.
I thought it was a terrible show.
I
I
know he
really like
likes Kendrick
Kendrick
Lamar.
Lamar, but I think, look, one, he doesn't have the catalog to be a Super Bowl halftime performer, first of all. And second of all, the entire concept was about a rap beef between him and Drake, more or less.
Yeah, they
And
wanted
like,
to make they wanted to make sure everybody who most of the young my daughter, her husband, another couple that were there, they know Kendrick Lamar's music. All they were caring about is to see if he was going to take the shot at Drake that he took.
yeah, I mean, to me, that's just like kind of lame and boring. And to 99.9% of people, they aren't going to care about that. So, whatever.
I like
Growing old, I guess.
I like the Eminem, Irv Gotti, Ja Rule fights back in the day.
Thank you. A true rap beef.
True
You're
rap beef.
a true rap beefers beefer.
Yep.
All right, let's switch it to the Bengals. Did you see anything from this that was instructive? I know everyone has to come out with content now, and so it's like the Super Bowl happens. It's like, okay, how did this relate to our organization? I saw a lot of columns like that. Did you think there was anything there for the Bengals to look at?
My boss asked me that too. He says, "Is there a column in there somewhere?" I said, yes and no, and I ended up not writing one because here's the thing: the Eagles have drafted well, and they're really good on the defensive front. The Bengals haven't drafted well, and they're not very good on the defensive front. So, I mean, it's a pretty simple concept: draft better and draft better defensive linemen.
Yeah, and then everyone wants to point out. Then they paid all their guys. They paid all. It was like, yeah, they did, but they also drafted the right guys to pay. That's the first part of it.
And they also have a chunk of dudes on rookie contracts contributing. That's a big deal. That allows you to pay guys.
The other big news this week came out yesterday before we're recording this podcast. Jermaine Pratt has requested a trade from the Bengals, according to a report by NFL Network. My reaction to this was, okay, thanks. Skinny, where do you go from there? Here.
So I am writing a column on this. It probably won't be long because I don't think I can get a ton of depth out of it. But it's so laughable because here's the thing. My guess, and I'm just guessing at this. Number one, he was always going to be a candidate for a cap casualty. I mean, this past year, he backslid. I don't look at the tackle numbers because he did lead this team in tackles. He had a bunch of them. That doesn't tell the whole story. It was clear for the naked eye that he lost a step. Go look at his PFF grade. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it kind of marries up what your eyeballs showed you. So he was a candidate for a cap casualty. So here's my read on this. My read on this is Al Golden has spent the time since he got hired evaluating his personnel. And he may have gone to Jermaine Pratt, or maybe word trickled back to Jermaine Pratt that Al doesn't think very highly of you. They're probably going to whack you. So what do you do to get out in front of that? Because you know you're probably going to get whacked. I want to be traded. I mean, that's what this is, a save face moment for Jermaine Pratt is all it is.
You can't fire me. I quit.
Right. No, right. And here's the thing. If you're the Bengals, if you can get anything back from him, good luck to you. Listen, he'll land with a team because he is a starting caliber linebacker. He's not a high level starting caliber linebacker, but he's a star. So he's going to land with somebody. But is somebody going to take on his current contract and give up a pick for that? Not if they're smart. They'll just wait for the Bengals to whack him and sign him for cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, this is just silly stuff by Jermaine Pratt. Now, is he
hilarious.
terrible? No. Was I interested in him potentially coming back? Like, that would have been fine with me. I wasn't, you have to get rid of him. But him requesting a trade, come on, man. We were literally 2 weeks ago talking about whether or not you were going to get cut as a cap casualty. So this reaction when I saw this come across, I truly just laughed for a second. I was like, great. I mean, who cares?
Yeah, I did too. I'm like, you basically have gotten word trickled to you that Al doesn't think you can play, and that was your coach at one point who helped develop you, and now he's probably looking and going, that's not the same Jermaine I remember. Let's go a different direction.
Yeah. Tee Higgins also in the news again this week. Feels like that's all we've been talking about for a month or so. He spoke to Joe Danneman. Big quote there was after they were talking about the contract situation. He said, "It's not in my hands right now. I got to do what I need to do. And if that's go to another team, then that's what happens." And then he sent out a tweet yesterday that said something to the effect of, if anything happens, I'll let you all know first, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna let y'all know first, I think is what is literally what it said. That was all it was. And that was at a the cryptic part of that is, does that mean he thinks there's a deal coming from the Bengals? Because at this point, you can't negotiate with other teams. So I mean, so what's he gonna is it feels like if that feels imminent, the imminent part of it would be he's coming back to the Bengals, or is it him realizing we aren't going to come to a deal? I'm going to have to sign with a team. But we're another month from that taking place.
I got the sense we live in a surface level social media world where it's like, we tweet, we see other media members' tweets. There's a lot of stuff out there that we see, but then there's this whole nother underground Bengals Twitter world that you and I do not live in, and I do not want to live in. But Tee Higgins' mother lives in. She's like down in there with the real deep, dark Bengals fans that tweet at 3 a.m. and have beefs with Ravens fans and stuff like that. She talks to those people online. So I almost wonder if this was one of those situations where fans had some type of crazy conspiracy that was circulating online somewhere. It got back to his mom. And so he was putting out a message of like, hey, none of that's true. None of that's happened. I'll let you know when it happens. That was my first instinct when I saw him tweet that.
That's a great read on it. Like I said, I mean, it's not, he's not signing with another team tomorrow or Monday. He can't.
It just didn't seem like there was anything to happen here when he said that, right?
Right. Other than again, if you believe a deal is imminent with the Bengals.
Yeah. Maybe this is unfair. T seems a little bit fragile to me. Obviously from the physical standpoint that we've had the injury history with him, but mentally, I'm just not sure. Like when he was talking to Joe about his season that he had and how he almost fell off and lost it, and he was really struggling to get back because he wasn't playing as well and his role wasn't what he wanted it to be, and he was worried about all that stuff. I mean, I don't know, man. I just don't love the way this guy seems to be in terms of his mentality.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of his in a lot of ways. I'm not a fan of his enough to pay him in the $30 million sphere, but I mean, listen, I think this guy's been nothing but a pro since he got here. I think the injuries do bother him. I know it bothered him because Ben Baby talked to him and he was on the verge of tears earlier in the year when fans were claiming that he was jaking it because of the free agency status, and he wasn't. Everybody knew he wasn't because he had to go ball out and put up numbers in order to get to where he is right now and get paid by somebody. So, I mean,
it kind of bothers me that he's bothered by that stuff, though. I just don't.
Yes, but I mean,
he seems too involved with fan reactions and things like that. It just seems a little soft mentally to me. But maybe this is just the new era. Maybe everyone's that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I really and truly, Rick, I don't embrace social media much. I use it as a whatever tool I have to use it for. I don't need to be clapped back at. I don't need to clap back at you. I'm too old for that stuff. But his generation is very much involved in that stuff, to your point. And I think a lot of those people do take some of that stuff very, very personally, whether you like it or, I mean, to me, it's just easy. Just ignore it. Your life is going to be so much better if you just ignore it. I promise you. But I get that for a lot of these guys, it's hard to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, that's easier said than done. I totally get that. I mean, even for us who when, we'll say, oh, just ignore it. We don't care about that stuff. But then someone says something to you and you reply back to it sometimes because you saw it. And that's what you feel like doing. It's a natural reaction. I get that. But whenever I hear him talk and let's factor in the fact that he's constantly out of the lineup. He's constantly hurt. So that's part of him just being legitimately physically fragile. But then it's also, man, every time I hear him talk, it seems like there's a little bit of sometimes not drama in terms of like he's a bad teammate or a bad guy, but just drama in terms of like he's sad or he's upset or
Well,
something's bothering him.
I think he truly wants to be here. Deep down wants to be here, but also understands on the business side of it, maybe that's not going to come to fruition. And I think that does make him sad.
Yeah. I just wish receivers weren't always so emo, but I guess that's been the story of time going back since I've
Maybe,
been
yeah.
watching football.
Yeah.
The odds to land Tee Higgins from betonline.ag. Denver Broncos 3-1, Washington Commanders 4-1, Pittsburgh Steelers 5-1, Chargers 6-1, Patriots 7-1, Titans 9-1, Bills 10-1. Do you put any stock into those odds? Obviously, these are if he were to be traded. Not,
Yeah.
The Bengals aren't included here.
Or yeah, whatever.
Or, I mean, I'm sorry, if you were to leave, yeah.
Yeah, if you were to leave, the Bengals were not included in that.
Yeah.
No, they were interesting a little bit. I mean, could you imagine with Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Tee Higgins? That's a pretty good group of receiver passers right there, right?
That would be the scariest one to think about, is him being added to the Commanders.
I mean, can you imagine the NFC with that group, with obviously Philly bringing back what it's bringing back, Detroit's still in a window to win. San Francisco, I think, is going to have a bounce back year only because they were dealing with just a boatload of injuries. That is a packed and stacked conference now. And so, I mean, the AFC too, but I mean, both conferences honestly are very, very stacked at the moment, to be honest, because of the quarterback situation in the AFC.
And by the way, I don't like the idea of him ending up with the Steelers either.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on the Bengals? Tee Higgins? Anything going on?
No, we're about 2 weeks from the combine, and so I'll trudge up there and see what Duke Tobin has to say. It's the most joyous time of the year.
All right.
Love
One quick college football thought before we get into college basketball, where we've got a lot to talk about. Ohio State has hired former Patriots defensive coordinator and Lions head coach Matt Patricia as the new defensive coordinator in Columbus to replace Jim Knowles, who took the job at Penn State. What did you think of this hire, Skinny?
I think a guy who wears a pencil in his ear, this is a pen for the record, is a goof. That guy is a grade A goof. I mean, he was a goof as the head coach. He couldn't have been goofier as the head coach of the Lions.
He was a goof. He was pretty well respected as a defensive mind with the Patriots, I think. It feels like a pretty big name to get, right?
It is a pretty big name to get, but I mean, I don't know. I'm one of those guys, I just don't believe in these coaching tree things. I just don't. I mean, just because the head coach is great doesn't mean you're going to be great. And I think a lot of these Belichick guys, Charlie Weiss was a failure basically as a head coach. Patricia was a failure as a head coach, and maybe he's in his comfort zone as a defensive coordinator. Josh McDaniels. I don't know. Listen, it is a big name. I know he is well respected for whatever reason, despite being a goof. So I guess kudos to Ohio State. They got a big name guy who's had a large. I mean, the resume looks great, other than his head coaching tenure at Detroit.
The Mike thing with getting the former like NFL head coach name who's coming back to the college ranks, I think that can be a great thing. Work out well. I mean, it worked out well with Chip Kelly on the offensive side of things last year. But you have to make sure that guy is hungry and is bought in on leveling up his career again. The concern you have is if they come back thinking, well, this is an easier level. I'm coming back as a retirement gig. You're benefiting from getting my wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, he's too young for that.
Yeah, and he's not that type of guy, I don't think. I think he's in a spot where he needs to revive his career a bit, and he wants to get back to kind of the top level of the sport. So I think he'll work hard. I think it's a big name. Who knows how it'll go, but that feels like a pretty good get. All right, let's switch gears to college basketball here. Skinny, number 15, Kentucky, stomped South Carolina 80-57 over the weekend, then beat number 5, Tennessee 75-64. Both of those games were at Rupp Arena. They go to Texas on Saturday. They got this one over Tennessee without Jackson Robinson, and Lamont Butler went out after playing 22 minutes with a re-injury of his shoulder. Skinny, I don't know that I've ever seen a team like this Kentucky team where they're not a great team. They struggle to win some games where you shake your head at, but anytime they play a big game, they show up and they play their best. They are now 7-1 against top 15 opponents this year, which is a school record for top 15 wins in a season.
It is crazy to think. It is truly, though, and I think you'll agree with this, that is a team that is totally a sum of its parts, which then is odd that you lose two of the major parts in Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler and still win. The freshman Trent Noah came up big. I'm not so sure he's not going to be pretty good. I don't know about great, but I think
the Mountain Mamba they're calling.
Mountain Mamba, baby, yeah. I think he's got a chance to be pretty good.
He's not he gets the label as like the white Kentucky
Right.
kid shooter off the bench, but he's a little bit bigger and more
He's got
physically active than
he's
that.
I got active hands. Yeah, he can body you up a little bit defensively.
And the drive
I
he had
will
late was nice to watch.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say is I don't know how sustainable not having Jackson Robinson, Lamont Butler for a period of time is. Can you go to Texas and steal a win without them? Yeah, maybe. Now I think if you're a Kentucky fan, you go Kirk Creasy, you little creep. Why aren't you back playing? But we talked about that last week of why that's the case. I was looking at a message board this week, and some fans were rumors are Kerr's coming back, and I think one guy just went in and said, "No, he's not a chance, not where he's at." Think about the whole situation. I'm like, yeah. That. I mean, if he was coming back, he'd be back by now, especially right now, where he'd be getting a boatload of minutes as a starting point guard on a top 20 team.
Well, and even more telling, the coaching staff isn't talking about him. They're not
Correct.
giving updates
You're
on
right.
him now when you're talking about
Correct.
this guy coming back or that guy coming back. Kerr was supposed to be back to basketball activities already, and they've quit even giving updates on him.
Yeah, and again, we talked about it last week. I get why he's doing it. I have a hard time blaming him. It's just the world we live in today. But yeah, I just don't know how sustainable it is. I think if I'm Mark Pope, I'm going to have to bite the bullet. Hope you can get through the Texas game. They're not very good. You got Vandy at home coming up. That should be a winnable game. You got a game that you're probably going to lose even if you're at full strength and added a body going to Alabama. I would try to get those guys healthy for the stretch run, which is an Auburn home game, an LSU home game, and a road game at Missouri. And hopefully, add to your resume that way, and then make sure those guys are healthy for the tournament. It's a tough spot to be in. I mean, you don't have a point guard at the moment. I mean, Travis Perry's his lone point guard. Now they do play a lot because of the zoom action, Rick. They obviously play a lot through the center, so I'm not so sure how vital a point guard is to that offensive attack, but somebody's got to guard the opposing point guard. That's the point of Lamont Butler.
Yeah, which Amari's been great as a passer, by the
Yeah.
way, in that
man.
offense. He really passed the ball well as a big man. It's funny because it felt like they were limping into that South Carolina game big time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, where's this season headed with these guys out, especially? And then somehow they win South Carolina, which wasn't surprising. But then for them to turn around and get this one without those guys playing was really impressive to me. I'd rather have this type of team as a fan. I'd rather watch a team like Kentucky than almost any other type of team. Like obviously, if you can have an elite team that's just has no flaws, great.
Right.
But if you're going to have flaws for your team, I'd much rather have the team that's like, who knows what you're gonna get. They could be beaten by anyone on any given night, but when you play a big game, they show up every single time, man. They give you a shot in every big game. That's just fun to watch as a fan. I mean, they have 8 quad ones wins, Skinny. There's only one team in the country with more, and that's Auburn.
Yeah, that's where the faction, the fan base that was thinking this team was going to slip out of the tournament was no. I mean, they were, again, unless they melted down completely, lost every game, they were not slipping out of the tournament, and they're still very clearly, I think, as of this morning, bracket matrix, I think they're still clearly on the 4 seed line, and they have a chance to play your way up a spot probably, and all things considered, maybe slide down. I don't think they slide worse than 5th, to be honest with you.
And they've got better wins than, like I said, pretty much everyone not named Auburn.
Right? No, right.
Their resume is totally fine. One question for you, Skinny. Who is Kentucky's best player?
I think I'll go Otega Oweh. The most important still to me is Lamont Butler.
That's exactly how I answer that question too. Otega Oweh, I think I'm in the camp that he is their best player, but I would also agree that it feels like they need Butler more than anyone because of the point guard situation.
And just because
and the defensive toughness.
And again, guy's a winner. I mean, he helped take San Diego State to a Final Four. And just when watching him in that tournament run and watching him since he's been at Kentucky, he just makes winning plays, and it's so hard to define, right? But you just watch him, and it might be a hockey assist he gets no credit for it. It may be making the right rotation defensively, stuff that people don't pay attention to. He just makes winning plays. And oh, by the way, if you need a tough bucket, he can go get it on occasion to get a tough bucket for you.
Yeah, you're right. Seeing him do it with 2 different programs, it really jumps out at you. It's like, oh, he's the key. He's the reason why this works when he's in the lineup for those teams. Cincinnati beat BYU 84-66 on Saturday, and Utah 85-75 on Tuesday. They go to Iowa State on Saturday. Skinny, I don't think anyone could have seen a 3-game winning streak coming after the home loss to West Virginia for this UC team.
And 80-plus points per game since then, right? We talked about it last week. I mean, I got to give Wes Miller credit for the lineup change.
Dodgeball.
We even talked about the dodgeball game that relaxed everybody. Um, and we talked. I said, go get these next 2 wins, and then maybe that does prove that this lineup change works. I mean, it's proven to be the right move at the right time. Now, can you go steal one at Iowa State? I don't know about that. I don't know if this team's there yet, but kudos to them, because I'm with you. I just watching the way that team reacted in the West Virginia game looked like they were done. I mean, done with a capital D.
Well, and the two guys that we probably were the hardest on after that stretch of futility, Jizzle James and Aziz Bandago, have both turned around their season the last 2 or 3 games. I mean, they've played much better. Jizzle had 24 against BYU with 6 threes, 25 against Utah with 6 assists and 2 turnovers. And Aziz had a double-double against Utah with 10 points and 10 rebounds. He's been much more active on both ends. The thing about UC that I'd be concerned about, even as they're playing a little bit better, is that CMOS has really been taken out of the mix offensively in Big 12 play. I mean, he had that great non-conference stretch, but ever since they got into conference play, teams have really been able to take him out from an offensive standpoint. And Dan Skillings hasn't really gotten it going either over the last couple games as they started to play better. And if it's me, I would feel like you need both of those guys to play pretty well if you're going to have any chance down the stretch here.
Yeah, I need at least one of them.
Yeah.
And you needed Jizzle to take that step forward. And again, maybe it's just a small window of games against and a couple of them being at home, or maybe again this is what he and who knows, maybe the whole Skillings dynamic was he was worried of getting Dan involved in the offenses, and now he's just worried about more himself.
Yeah, I mean, look, they just won 3 in a row without those guys playing well. So
Right.
if you get those back in the mix at all, those guys playing and scoring on offense again, maybe this team still has something left in there. Who knows?
And if you go to bracket matrix, there's only they have all the way through the seeds, and then as you know, they have some others that are still in the hunt. Basically, I think there's like only 6 teams listed, and Xavier and UC are 2 of them. So UC's back in that mix to some degree.
Yeah, that's it was funny because Xavier, even though they lost the game to Villanova, and Xavier fans were like distraught after that. It's like, oh, they have no chance now. Xavier actually moved a spot closer to the cut line on bracket matrix. Not all of those have been updated. I understand that, but enough had been updated for a couple teams to fall out. UC jumped back into the mix right ahead of Xavier, and now Xavier is the last team still showing up in brackets. Only one bracket still has them in, according to Bracket Matrix, which is the same with Cincinnati, but both of them are sitting there still in the at-large field, the 5th and 6th teams away from the cut line. So it's a remote chance for both teams at this point, but I guess you never know, and obviously UC has a few more big quality win opportunities playing in the Big 12 than Xavier does left.
And how many times since conference play has started have we had Kentucky, Xavier, and UC all win on like back-to-back nights?
Probably not a lot.
I'm going to guess maybe not at all. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
Xavier lost at Villanova 80-68 on Sunday, then won at Providence 91-82 on Wednesday. They host DePaul on Saturday. Skinny, the way I've been saying it is Xavier pretty much blew the chance they had to roar back to an at-large bid and control their own destiny. I don't know that it's completely dead now, but they pretty much need a miracle run here over the final 6 games that are left.
Yeah, I just don't think there can be a slip up, and maybe if you can run the table, get you up to probably a 4 seed in the Big East tournament. That gives you a fighting chance to then go win that if that's what you need to do. What has gotten into Dante Maddox?
That's an interesting one. Let me ask you about this, because he had 24 points at Nova, 26 at Providence. He's shooting the ball really well. Do you think that coaches are going to have to rethink how they handle certain guys in this transfer portal era where, like, let's think about Dante Maddox, for instance. The idea is that, you hold guys accountable. They got to get better. You got to hold them to your standard so they improve over the course of the year and they get better. But when it's a guy like that, where you're bringing them up from the mid-major level, they kind of are a finished product. They've been playing for 4 or 5 years already. You know what they are. You brought him in to be an offensive piece. Then you freaked out because he couldn't defend to your standard and play the way you wanted to play. So you kind of quit playing him at all. He loses a lot of confidence, falls out of the rotation. And then now you get to the end of the year where you're forced to play him again, and he starts building some confidence. He starts showing that he can give you something. Do you think there's going to be a reconsideration there of like, maybe it's not worth holding these guys as accountable, quote unquote, throughout the year when we're only going to have him for 1 year? Like, what are we trying to get him better for? He's not going to help us next year by raising the standard and holding him accountable. So should we just keep trying him throughout the year to see if he can give us more.
I think that's a great question and a great point. I will say this, and I think you'll agree with this. I do think from a coaching perspective, it still comes down to trust. Do I trust you to guard? I mean, I know you're going to have some slip, but if you can't, if it, for whatever reason, that's hard. It's hard to play guys if you don't trust them. And I don't even know if it's a matter of accountability, Rick. It's a matter of, do I trust you? I don't need you to be a lockdown guy, but I need you to be at least engaged. And if you're not, and then let's just say maybe you're not scoring on the other end, then I just can't play. I can't trust you in moments. I mean, listen, when you get to conference games, you can't afford to lose games. You can't afford to let guys play through mistake. Now, maybe you could go back in retrospect in non-con play and go, I'm just going to have to let him play through this. Hopefully he gets better defensively with more minutes. But yeah, I just think it's a really tough spot. I think your question's a good one, and I honestly think if you're a smart coach, you do have to bite the bullet and examine this. But when push comes to shove, it's a matter of, I got him in there and gave up back to back. I can't trust him. I got to be able to trust you.
Yeah, and I'm sure like Xavier's coaching staff would probably answer this by saying, well, like, had we not done that earlier in the year, he never would have gotten to this point where he can give us 24 points and play well off the bench. But, maybe that's true, maybe that's not, I don't know. My argument just would be, it seems like you might have to start rethinking how you go about holding your guys accountable, working them to get the most value out of your investments. When you're paying a guy a bunch of money for 1 year of his services and you kind of bench him for most of the year because he doesn't do the thing that you already knew he wasn't really good at. Now granted, Dante Maddox's decision-making was not good earlier in the year. He was taking ill-advised shots. He was having some turnovers. So there were plenty of issues with his play. I'm not trying to act like he was setting the world on fire and they just weren't giving him a chance.
Your question's a great one. I think your question's a great one because, again, it used to be you hold the freshmen accountable and then they develop into sophomores. And then by the time they're junior or senior, they're ready. But you're right. You don't have that luxury any longer. And to your point, these guys already come with the habits they come with. Are you going to be able to break those in a year? Probably not. So if that's the case, then you better think long and hard of who you're getting out of the portal too.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like they're to the point now where it's like, no, there's no Trey Green. He bailed 9 games into the season, and you're later in the year where you got to do something. You got to switch it up. You got to get some more offensive firepower. So they just started letting Dante play. It's not like he's been perfect. He still struggles defensively. He still takes some ill-advised shots and throws up crazy threes and gets them blocked or turns the ball over. But once he got past those mistakes, he started to build some confidence and play like the guy he always was. And now you're seeing he can give you 25 on occasion when he gets hot and throws in threes. And I just wonder, how much did they miss that throughout the course of the year? And is there a better way to try to maximize your value out of that NIL payment going forward?
I think coaches probably have to examine that part of it. But I go back to, maybe you, like to your point, you tried it and yet he didn't give me much on offense. He gave me nothing on defense. How do I trust to play? It's not a matter of accountability. Again, it goes back to a matter of trust. But yeah, and then when push comes to shove, you just go, got to play him. We're not just talking about a guy who came off the bench and got you 11 and 14, which would be fun. He got you 50 points in 2 games. That's a ton.
Right. And the thing about this Providence game, and I wrote this in my recap, is this game to me, I know Xavier fans were pissed about it because they had a 26-point lead midway through the half. Then they completely faltered defensively and let Providence come back, and they only won by 9 points. But to me, this was the type of Xavier team that I always expected Xavier to be coming into the year. When I said, like, hey, you might be starting Zach Freemantle at center and playing 4 guards on offense, I always said, you might need to score 100 to beat this Xavier team, but Xavier's going to need to play that way to win. Like, they're going to have to outscore you every game because defensively they're not going to be very good. This Providence game is kind of what I expected out of them. They didn't play that good. It was kind of ugly. Ryan Conwell didn't play well, their leading scorer, and yet they scored 91 points pretty easily, ended up winning the game almost by double digits, even though they completely faltered at the end and were terrible defensively for the final 10 minutes.
And some of that, I'll just give it to the human nature element, to the fact that a home team is desperate catching up. Listen, you went on the road, You didn't survive a 2-point game. You still won fairly handily. It was always in hand, even though Providence made some runs there. I wouldn't be disappointed in this win because this was the game. This was the one game to me, Nova always felt like it was a loss. If you go there and steal it, that would be certainly the feather in the cap they needed. But this was the one game I thought that in this stretch of games was going to be one of the tougher ones just because it's on the road.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately for Xavier, Providence is really undermanned right now. They're so banged up and shorthanded, but no, it was definitely an important win. And who knows what Xavier's odds are of still getting that large bid at this point, but you got to win out either way. So you might as well stack some wins here.
Yeah, and I'd say for both UC and Xavier, it goes back to this. I mean, if you get yourself back to the bubble line, that's all well and good, but then you're holding your breath that there's not a bunch of bid stealers out there, and that's the problem.
Yeah, you do not control your own destiny anymore. Right. You need the bubble to be very weak at the end, and you need there to be almost no bid stealers. So we'll see how it goes. NKU lost at home to Robert Morris 81-76, and they play at Green Bay tomorrow on Friday. We thought NKU was turning the corner with back-to-back wins over Oakland and Cleveland State, Skinny, but then they fell apart late in the Robert Morris game, and Darren Horn was not happy at all on our post-game interview with him on the radio, saying that his team was soft and that they might not have the right guys. What were your thoughts? They won 2 games and then lose like that. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Robert Morris is a tough match for them, in my opinion. But
they just won at Cleveland State.
Right. I get it. I get the frustration because I'm going to guess Darren really felt like they were about to turn a corner, and they've, defense has kind of been their staple with that matchup zone and stuff. But, saying that, I mean, so what do you do to fix it? I guess there's nothing you can do to fix it right now. I mean, I guess it means you better go hit the portal hard in the offseason. And no offense, portaling at the mid-major level is really, really hard.
Yeah, it is. It's such a crapshoot because you're going to be taking like guys from the Division II level like they have, or guys who have basically haven't played at their previous stop that you're hoping, hey, he was a project. It didn't work out for them. Maybe he'll work out for us. He learned. He got a little bit better there sitting on the bench. Maybe this year he'll be ready to play for us. That's a lot of what you're doing at their level, especially when most of these teams have no NIL money in the Horizon League, or very minimal. So you don't have much to offer these guys to get them. So you have to hit on guys, and the way you're recruiting them is basically a crapshoot. So yeah, it's going to be tough in the portal going forward to get the right guys, quote unquote. I also think, from a coach's standpoint, I agree with everything Darren said. You got to be angry about that performance. You got to try to get your guys to be tougher defensively and all that. From a fan's perspective, this game didn't really discourage me much, because my issue a couple weeks ago when they were struggling is they couldn't score. They couldn't get the offense going. Well, they scored plenty of points against Robert Morris. They should have won that game. The defense let them down. NKU's been ranked in the top 3 in defensive efficiency pretty much every year under Darren Horn that he's been coaching the Horizon League. They'll figure out the defense. The matchup zone in the conference tournament always gives teams problems. So for me, and being a top 4 seed or even a top 5 seed now is pretty much out the window for NKU. They're not really playing for position in the conference tournament anymore. As long as they don't fall into the bottom 3 seeds, the 9th, 10th, or 11th, they won't have to play that first round game on the road. And I think they're pretty safe from that. So at this point, I don't really care about their record. I care about, do you show enough offensively that you could actually win the conference tournament? And I thought this Robert Morris game was good enough to do that, quite honestly. It didn't discourage me much about their chances.
Like I said, they played him tooth and nail twice, right? I mean, what was the first one? The triple overtime.
Triple overtime, yeah.
But they just feel like a bad matchup for NKU.
Yeah, it's difficult. And by the way, NKU did have a pretty good lead in the second half and let it slip away. So it wasn't good to let that lead slip away. But it was a game they could win, and it wouldn't discourage me too much. NKU is now 6-8 in the league. IU Indy is the 9 seed at 4-11. So that's where you're trying not to slip below IU Indy, and you do play them coming up. So NKU should be safe, assuming they beat IU Indy. Any other thoughts on the Norse or college basketball, Skinny?
Nope, just looking forward. I mean, we're inching closer to the start of conference tournaments.
Yeah, it's going to be, because it's kind of been a rough year locally for UC, Xavier, and NKU, it's going to be really nice to get into the championship week and see the conference tournaments and NCAA tournament.
I don't know how much you do this. I guess I do it out of the macabre nature of it. I like to look at the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC standings every once in a while and just look mid-pack and below and go, good Lord, that team is 6-7 in that league. And you see all the names, like some historic names, and you're like, and they're actually good teams. It just, these leagues they just literally, they eat each other.
Think about the SEC tournament, the Big Ten tournament this year. Like, those two are just going to be insane. SEC especially going to be insane to watch. So I'm looking forward to that. Let's get into some Ask Skinny Anything. We only have a couple of questions here. What is Skinny's favorite Super Bowl halftime show performance?
See, I'm so old school. Rolling Stones for me. We were joking about this actually at my daughter's house. You're way too young for this. But people need to look this one up. The worst of all time wasn't the Janet Jackson one. Go look up.
That was the best.
Go look at the Up With People one from back in the early 1970s. There was nothing worse than the Up With People halftime show with Anita Bryant.
up with people? Okay, I'll have to look that up after the show. Yeah, I was just gonna say I can remember vividly the Janet Jackson nipple coming loose at when I was at Jimmy Ubel's house back in high school in the day. So that was a great moment. In all seriousness, the one that always sticks out to me. I don't know if it was necessarily my favorite, but the one that I feel like was most iconic was that Nelly, Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears Pepsi one from when I was, I don't know, maybe 7th or 8th grade-ish.
I'll be honest with you. I thought the Bengals Super Bowl halftime show was good.
Oh, it was fantastic. That was the Snoop Eminem,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, because McPherson was out there being a heathen watching them, ruined his career.
Ruined his career.
What's your go-to excuse when you get absolutely destroyed in an athletic competition?
I'm not an excuse. I'm really not. I'm a they're better than us guy a lot of times. I really am. I mean, if we lose to a team that's not better than us, then there is no excuse. There's what do we need to do to get better? But when there's I mean, like this year we played Olentangy Liberty from Columbus. They're like the number 5 team in the state. They in Ohio. They've got a 6'10" center going to Northwestern. We would have had to play out of our yin yang to even keep that. We lost by 22. There's no excuse there. They're just better.
See, no, you're gonna.
It's okay to just say somebody's better. It really, that's the funny part. It's okay to occasionally go, you know what? That team was just better.
This is not about you coaching and doing the right thing, Skinny. This is like when you're out golfing with 4 of your buddies and drinking, and you come in last in the Skins game. What is your excuse there? You drank too much. You had a bad hammy.
No, I usually don't make excuses. If I play poorly, I played poorly. I suck. It's okay to say I suck.
I would say the back's flaring up. I'm a back guy. I've had a bad back my whole life. Yeah.
I might this summer because my elbows are now almost back to fully healthy.
Oh, you got the elbow. You got the built-in elbow excuse. How would that not be?
That may come into play this summer. We'll see if that's
when you're golfing. Depends on how you're hitting them.
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
I'm not a big excuse guy, man.
I actually do believe that. What's the coldest sporting event Skinny ever attended?
I was at the Freezer Bowl. I mean, I know everybody says they were. I definitively was. My dad was a season ticket holder, and my dad brought a flask that we kind of shared, and I was only at the time 18, going on 19 years old. The legal drinking age in Ohio, then, by the way, for 3.2 beer was 18. But my dad had a flask that didn't really help. I remember we put chili powder in our socks that was supposed to help keep some heat in there and keep it warm. That didn't help. I went and got hot chocolates for each of us at one point. By the time I got them back, and this is no, the time I got them back to my dad, they were like literally drinking chocolate milk. That's how quickly that stuff was cold. And I do remember midway through the 4th quarter, I looked over, my dad was like literally shivering. Okay. And my feet, I couldn't feel them. And we didn't have a long walk to where, because my dad worked downtown and he always parked in the same place and knew the people there, and he always greased them a little extra each month, and they always gave him a good spot to park on game day. So we didn't have a real long walk. We had to walk back across Fort Washington Way to go. And I just remember as soon as we got in the car, this is in the days when the heaters were not at face level. They just came out of the floor, floorboards. So we just sat there, and my dad said, I can't drive until I get warmed up a little bit. Because I got scared for my dad for a minute. I mean, when he started shivering like he couldn't stop, I'm like, Dad, let's go. Bengals already had the game in hand, so we didn't see the last 6 or so minutes of the game. And I remember I got my shoes and socks off to kind of massage my feet that I couldn't feel. All of a sudden, that heat kicked in, and it felt like 1,000 knives were stuck into my feet, man. It was brutal. I don't know if that game jarred me, but I really, really hate being out in the cold. I hate everything about it. I took my daughter back in 2007 to a Kentucky-Tennessee game at Kentucky. It was a great game. It was like a 5-4 overtime game, like 52-50. Tennessee won it. It was a great game. We sat right back next to the Tennessee band and heard Rocky Top a billion times. But that game was cold. I remember, and it wasn't like it was like in the 20s cold, maybe even low 30s. It was just like one of those weird colds. And I'm like, I'm not sure I ever want to go to a football game as a fan again if it's cold like this. And I don't know if I have, Rick. I'll be honest with you. I can't stand the feeling of it.
I'm with you on that. I'm not for the cold. I am not tough when it comes to standing outside in the cold either. That has no appeal to me. Let's wrap it up with this. Has Skinny tried the Skyline ice cream yet?
I have not. Initially, it sounded gross. I'm not a big cinnamon ice cream guy. Most people tell me it has a cinnamon tint to it. Yeah. I know some friends that have tried it and said it's actually pretty good. I might get around to it, but I'm just not. We have greater cinnamon ice cream in the house because my wife, that's her favorite flavor, and I don't even try to steal that. I don't like cinnamon ice cream.
Yeah, they had asked if we could get that on the show here for
All
you to
right.
eat and taste test, but like we don't do this in the same spot, so I wasn't able to bring it in for you and have you try it.
I'll go get some. I mean, I'll do that. I'll do that as an homage to the show. I did that with the star cluster thingamajigger, and it was quite
Yeah,
delicious.
Star Crunch was good.
Yeah,
The thing I told the person was like, with the Greater Skyline thing, it feels played out. Like when I see Dan Horde 3 days later putting up his video review of it on social media, I know it's kind of been done. You know what I mean? It's like I might not be the first to be getting to this one, so I didn't know if we had to do it as well. But we'll do it like 2 weeks late to be fashionably late and revive it for Skyline and Graders. I'm sure they'll
there
be
we
happy.
go.
All right, that's all we got, Skitty.
All right, appreciate it, Rick, very much. We'll be back next week as we inch closer to the conference tournaments. The offseason for the Bengals is continuing to go on, and I'm sure we'll have more zaniness there and much, much more. And the Reds will be underway in spring training with workouts and inching closer to their first Cactus League game. For Rick Brewing, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.